Aerosmith quoted, "RISK is to graffiti what Aerosmith is to rock and roll." And that's one of the biggest compliments of my life. With them saying that, then every rock band in the world wants to work with me. I think there's a shakedown coming, and I think we're going to look at this era in art and think a couple things. One, we're going to think it's incredibly powerful and important because it's the first time in hundreds of years we have tapped into such a young demographic of art again. But we're also going to look at it as a big joke because there's so many artists that we're like, why the fuck did that guy do it? And if you're not fighting your shoulder to shoulder with someone in your crew, still fighting on the wall for your space, and you learn to work with people or go over people. You learn to either get on board or move out of the way.
Thousand Oaks, the name of this place, is creating a whole story in my mind as we're driving there. It reminds me of fairy tales and of dreams and of magic unfolding. Honestly, I have no idea where we're heading, but something in the name like Thousand Oaks is so mysterious, and I'm sure something is to be discovered there. And as soon as we enter the impressive compound of RISK, I know why I had these visions. And I feel thrown back to my teenage years when I was watching MTV and those shows where famous artists opened their doors and showed their creative worlds that were so beyond imagination and beyond what I've known. Creative playgrounds and pools and everything you can or can't imagine. So this is what we encountered at RISK's creative universe. There's a house for everything, for every creative task, for every craft you can imagine. There's a whole house. Like there's every spray can with every shade of color you can imagine. And there's some kind of magic going on there, like people working there and building all these dreams, all these things come to reality. And yeah, sure, you walk down the hallway and there's guitars of Aerosmith, and there's the drum set where you used to play with the Chili Peppers, or I can't even remember all the names he dropped because it was so incredible. But of course, I would not be me if I hadn't realized all the weird details, like there were living dogs in the garden, one dog got missing, there was a huge Buddha statue surrounded by neon lights. And so the day passed. It was so inspiring what you could build out of your imagination, where your dreams can become true, because if you're working with performances and paintings and creative collaborations and you enter a world like RISK's world, where you see these things can manifest, these things happen. If you are at the right place at the right time, you get to know the right people, your dreams will unfold and you can create imaginative, inspiring places.
Today, we have the honor of chatting with a true pioneer in the world of contemporary art and graffiti, a legend whose work has transcended traditional boundaries and left a mark on both the streets and the art world. Our guest today is no one other than RISK, often hailed as the Godfather of West Coast graffiti. RISK, born RISK Graval, has been a trailblazer since he first hitchhiked from Southern California to New York City right after high school, making history as the first LA graffiti writer whose work ran on a subway car in 1988. Over the decades, RISK has collaborated with some of the biggest names in music and art, including painting the iconic graffiti in Michael Jackson's The Way You Make Me Feel video and designing the cover art for Blink-182's album 9 with his friend Travis Barker. His extensive list of collaborators includes Aerosmith, Slash, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Ice Cube, and many more. RISK's creative hub, known as The Compound, is a vibrant space in Thousand Oaks, California, that has been compared to Andy Warhol's factory. It's a place where artists from all walks of life come together to create, collaborate, and inspire one another. This artistic utopia fosters a sense of community and productivity, with RISK's unique and sustainable approach at its core. His works range from colossal sculptures crafted from repurposed materials to intricate graffiti and fine art pieces that challenge traditional mediums. Join us now as we visit the legendary compound in RISK's own gallery space where we conducted this interview. Let's delve into the mind and art of RISK, exploring his innovative projects, his influence on both commercial and fine art, and his commitment to inspiring the next generation of artists.
Transmute Tapes, a Maison Douce podcast. The Transmute Tapes, Maison Douce.
Hi RISK, thanks for taking the time and welcoming us here in your gallery. This is a pretty special place.
Yeah, we're not open to the public. It's invite only. It's by appointment only. You're just at the studio, so you saw we're 2 minutes away. So it's very easy for us to come open the door for people. Yep. So it works out. I call it like a glorified warehouse. It's just a fun place. It's a great place. It's awesome to be able to showcase my friends' work as well as mine. Yep. And do some really fun events.
Yep. You just had an opening here. Many artworks on display are collaborations with musicians. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we just did a show called Beyond the Stage. And I thought that was kind of cool because Beyond the Streets, they just opened up in China. And Roger Gaspin's a good friend of mine. And he does these wonderful shows about where graffiti artists have gone. And I thought this was a great opportunity to show where a lot of musicians have gone. Yep. And I happen to have a bunch of musician friends that are artists. And then I happen to be lucky enough to meet some incredible legends like Robbie Krieger from The Doors and Bernie Taupin and Ronnie Woods. So we could put all these people together and have this show. It was pretty cool. It was an awesome time,
How does your creative process look like when working with musicians?
Yeah, that's interesting. Collaborating with other artists, it's always been different. Like Bernie Taupin, he tends to do things that he picks that think will lend itself to my work and just give them to me and say, do it. That's how he wants to do it. And he considers, something, the piece may be strong or not so strong, like strong colors, not strong colors, whatever. And he gives me free reign. And then you'll have artists like Dave Navarro who actually want to come paint with me. Yep. And then we paint together, and we went to the same high school, and we know the same. We kind of had these journeys side by side, and came together later, and we did some really amazing things together. And he likes to actually be hands on and paint with me a lot, and kind of vibe. And you have Billy Morrison, who is comes from a very structured background with his art, very disciplined. He knows exactly what he wants. He's like, RISK, I want you to do the background. I want it crazy. I want it chaotic. And I want to come do this. And then I want you to come back and put letters on this. And that's cool too. So that's, 3 different people right there. And then you have Robbie Krieger, who comes to the studio and doesn't say much, and I can't read him at all. And then he sees the plexiglass and goes, that's what we need, dimension, doors. And I'm like, wow. He just said it all with like 3 words.
Wow, that's impressive.
And I'm like, cool. So we did, I did the plexiglass layers on his pieces. So I guess it's always different. When you're collaborating with someone, it's always different. It's just, I think the first thing with me, with collaborating with someone, is I have to hang with them first, like get to know them, hang out with them and vibe. Sometimes you're with people that you think are incredibly creative, but there's nothing that you can offer them or vice versa. Yeah. And sometimes, opposite. So with all these people at this show, I've been very lucky to have them as friends and be able to do that.
We've just been to your compound where there's also lots of instruments and even a studio set up for bands. So Has music always been such a big influence on your life and your art?
Yeah, man, it's kind of a crazy thing if you think about it, because music has always been a heavy influence to me with everything, my life and everything. Led Zeppelin being the most influential thing to me, and Bonham especially, the drummer, and drums. And it just kind of dictated my life. I kind of like lived my life according to songs and California Man and all these things, these songs when I was growing up, and they just happened. And the feeling I got was a rush, and then meeting other musicians, and they have the same rush. I'm like, wow, we have the same feeling, but I don't play an instrument, you know? And it's just kind of a crazy thing. And, you know, all these guys that came to see, you know, COVID was a thing that, you know, I hate saying this, but it was like such a great thing for a lot of creative people to get out of the norm of what they were doing and forced to do different things. And me, I was traveling around the world just painting murals, and I was exploring my color-filled mural stage where I just doing, like, my public art is color-filled murals, is different than my gallery art, which is mixed media, which is different than my graffiti, which is straight graffiti. They're very different things. But I was consumed with traveling around painting these color-filled murals. And COVID forced me to stay in the studio more. And it forced a lot of people to do different things. And what it did was I did this happy hour show where I invited people to come to the studio, whether you be a UFC fighter or a magician or a comedian or a musician or whatever, and talk about how art relates to you. Yeah. And I picked people that were artists. And I forged some great friendships with some people like Billy Morris and Dave Navarro, stuff like that, that I had these acquaintances with before. But we forged a solid friendship during COVID, and we did some great things together. So with that, I developed this kind of reputation of having all these musicians at the compound, and I've had all these opportunities for them to come play for us. And, you know, Aerosmith quoted, "RISK is to graffiti what Aerosmith is to rock and roll." And that's one of the biggest compliments of my life. And with that, with them saying that, then every rock band in the world wants to work with me. You know, it's like, it was that kind of thing. You know, I've done a bunch of stuff with Slash, and, you know, there's a band that's opening for Guns N' Roses right now called Dirty Honey. We just finished their whole album package that they just came to the studio, and they're going to come play at the gallery. So we have a lot of opportunities for these guys to come play and mingle with those guys. So that's kind of how that happened.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about that quote. This is probably one of the coolest quotes you can get, but at the same time, doesn't that put a lot of pressure on you and your artworks? Did things change after that quote from Aerosmith? It's
so crazy because, you know, I've had a few of these things in my career, and they're great. I love them. You know, I got knighted, you know, by the Medici family. And people ask you all the time, did you ever expect this to happen being a graffiti artist? And usually it's like galleries and museums. And I'm like, yeah, of course. I always expected that. That's nothing strange because I dedicated my life to this. I hope that I at least got to that level, you know, that. But when you start talking about, like, did you ever expect to paint for the Super Bowl? Did you ever expect to paint for Olympics? Did you ever expect to get knighted? No, that stuff's kind of crazy. And the Aerosmith thing was a funny thing because we live in Hollywood, you know, around Hollywood. So, you know, word gets out, and I turned down an R&B star, a rather huge R&B star. I was like, not interested, don't want to do it. And Aerosmith heard about this and go, that's our guy. And I went with them, and they wanted me to announce the world tour. So we went bombing. So we illegally painted all over the city, Aerosmith, Let Rock Rule coming on this date, blah, 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 blah. So we did this illegal graffiti all over it, and we became friends. And they got hooked on graffiti. So Joe Perry especially went out like all week straight, bombing. And he was just into it, you know. And that's how that happened. So, yeah. And then from that, you know, I met, you know, all these people. And
you just compared your creative process to a jam session, which I think is pretty special for a visual artist who usually work alone. Was collaboration always a part of your creative process?
Well, I think coming from a graffiti background and a very street background, and, you know, I grew up painting in Venice Beach at the Pavilion and you know, fighting over there. You know, there's a very aggressive nature over there. And, you know, we had to literally fight for our spots and fight, and those, you know, suicidal tendencies and the whole punk movement and all this stuff. And if you're not fighting, you're shoulder to shoulder with someone in your crew, still fighting on the wall for your space. And you learn to work with people or go over people. You learn to either, like, get on board or move out of the way. And you learn to respect people. And, you know, you respect that guy, so you give him his space. You don't respect that guy, you don't give him his space. But you learn to respect people and work with people because, you know, he has more letters in his name, so he needs a little bigger wall, or this, you know, all these things come into play, and you have to, you know, work with these things. So at a very young age, I learned how to work with people and adapt to surfaces as well. Like, you know, you don't always get to paint a clean surface, right? You know, sometimes you're on corrugated metal, sometimes you're, whatever it is, you have to adapt. So being very adaptive, I think, is a graffiti thing and that thing. So I've learned at a very young age to adapt and work with people. And it doesn't bother me. Like, you can't throw me off my game where I'm like, oh, fuck, this dude just used this, now I'm fucked. You know, I just figure out how to work with it. And I think one of my strengths would be that I could work with people and I could totally switch up my game anytime. Like if I was planning on outlining with white and he did this and now I got outline with whatever, I could work it out.
Yeah. You started at a very young age. You're doing art for over 30 years now. Do you remember the moment you noticed art for the first time, or even felt and decided to choose art as a path?
Well, you know, my grandmother told me that I told my grandmother one time I'm doing graffiti, you know, I was actually like kind of prominent at the time. I had done some stuff. I think I was doing the Michael Jackson video or something, right? I go, Grandma, I'm doing the Michael Jackson video, man. She's like, yeah, you've been doing that shit for years. I'm like, no, it's graffiti, Grandma. She goes, yeah. I go, no, Grandma, graffiti. It's graffiti art. She goes, you've been doing that shit for years. I'm like, no, I haven't. And she goes, yeah, you have. And I go, well, what's graffiti? She goes, you know, words. And I was like, wait, what? I go, what do you mean words? Tell me more. And she goes, you always wrote words like fire with fire, cloud with cloud, bubble with bubbles. And I was like, I did? And she goes, yeah. So she said when I was a kid, I would ask her how to spell things, and I'd write fire with flames. And I was like, wow. So I was doing kind of graffiti stuff. I don't remember it, right? But yeah, so I was doing that. And my uncles in a gang called Bucktown Badasses, and he put with a mop Bucktown across the 17th Street Canal Bridge, and it was so big. I was like, wow, look at that. It was illegal and it was big. And then there was a band called the Dukes in New Orleans that did an overpass. And I was like, all these things hit me, and that's whatever. So I started doing it. And when I did my first piece at school, I guess the moment you're talking about would be that first piece. So this kid from New York came to my school. He had pictures of a subway. I was a bad kid. I used to draw all over my desk, right? My whole desk were masterpieces or write books. All right. But they were just like pictures of waves and stuff. And I write Wipeout or Surf or stuff like that. And this kid goes, what do you write? I'm like, I don't write, I draw pictures. He goes, what do you write? I'm like, I don't write, I draw pictures. And I was like, what do you write? I'm like, motherfucker, you stupid? I draw pictures. And he told me about the subculture of writing. And he said, well, this is what we call it. He showed me these pictures of these trains. I was like, that shit's fucking cool. I go, I do that. But I do it on my desk. And he's like, yeah, you got to do it with spray paint. And he's like, what's your tag? And he told me what a tag is. And I was like, I don't have a tag. And I go, I guess it's surf. And he goes, all right, cool, you're surf. So that day I went out and I went to some hardware store down the street and I stole a couple cans of white, a couple cans of red, came back to my high school, sat there staring at my school until it got dark, jumped the fence, did the piece. Piece was terrible, like nothing like I imagined. Like I imagined all this crazy piece, all these arrows and all this cool shit. It was nothing. I think one arrow on F, maybe, I don't know. And the next day, all the kids standing around going, that's fucking cool. I'm like, that's cool? And they go, yeah. And I think that would be the moment. I was like, it was a terrible piece, but I knew I was hooked. Yeah. So because of the attention that I was getting without even, because they didn't know who, I couldn't tell people what it was. You have to understand, this is 1983. We didn't have graffiti in LA. Yeah. We had gang graffiti. So to see something in two colors that went over the windows and the whole, building, they're like, whoa, this shit's crazy. So that recognition I was getting without it being recognition to me was the moment that I had the aha moment. And then I kept coming to my school and bombing. And I went on to doing the rooftops and the surf and flames and all kind of shit.
Yeah, back in the days, you got that resonance from the other kids. It's like in music, right? It's like a high.
Right? High, and I got crazy with it, right? Because it started getting like the cat and mouse with the security and our school had security at night, so I'd have people watching, and we'd whistle and we'd run around, and then I figured out how to break into school and do lockers. I call them locker rockers. So I'd paint the lockers because they didn't know how to buff the metal yet, right? And then the security guard saying, "You guys want to see me break somebody's legs? I'll give you $200 if you tell me who did it." I was like, "Oh shit!" And luckily, no one knew I did it.
Okay.
And then because they would have ratted on me. But yeah, all those, it was great. And then I eventually got caught because I was the only surfer in the school that was always getting in trouble. So it was relatively easy for them to pick me up.
With your reputation, the spaces, the compound, and the gallery you have today, did it get easier or harder to create resonance with an audience?
You know what's crazy? Because when we were younger, we wanted that, right? We always wanted to be known. There's like, Coca-Cola had all these billboards around the city, and we had our names, Graffiti. We were a brand, and we said we have something to say. We could compete with them. We could, I don't need to spend millions of dollars to advertise. I'll just do it myself and all this stuff. It was all about risk, risk, risk. That's all it was. And then that was very important. And then, there comes a time when something changes and you realize you're not the only thing in the world, And I've had a few of those moments, but one of the most memorable moments was I was painting the Olympics in London at the Olympic Gardens or something with Shepard Fairey, Ron English, Tristan Eaton, and myself. And I got there, and everyone's in the bar, and Ron English and Shepard and everyone's there, and they go, "What are you going to paint? Risk?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." Like, "You don't have any plans?" I go, "No, I'll just do a risk piece or something." And they go, "Huh." And I was like, "What?" And they go, "No, cool, risk." And then Ron is like, you're on the world stage here, and you're going to write risk. He goes, "Everyone loves risk, but you don't have anything to say? You don't want to take this opportunity?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not a political artist, man. I don't get into that shit." And he's like, "Well, you don't have to be a political artist. You could, whatever. You could do this. You could do all these things." And I left super pissed off, man. I was like, "Fuck that dude." Mm-hmm. And I went upstairs to my room and I started thinking about it. I was like, So what makes me tick? What makes me the most happy? And if I'm doing this legitimately to support my family, maybe I should dig a little deeper to see what makes me tick and all these things. And I wanted to say, what was the most happiest I've ever been doing graffiti? And it's the next day driving down the freeway seeing the piece. And I drive by and I'm like, I got the goosebumps just talking about it, right? You love that shit. And then I realized, dude, I couldn't even really read it driving, 70, 90 miles per hour. So I know no one else read it, but everyone in the car was like, "That's fucking cool." So I was like, so it's just that splash of color and that adrenaline rush, right? So I wanted to see if I could evoke the same emotion without doing letters or characters. And I was like, that's where the color field shit comes in. So I come back, and I was playing with this already. So I come back and tell Ron, I said, "Hey, man, I'm doing the big color field mural. I'm just painting colors. And that's all I'm doing. That's fucking painting colors, because that's what I want to do. I want to evoke emotion with color. I don't want to say anything political." He goes, "Yeah, right, exactly." I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, that's what I need you to say." He goes, "You're a color field artist, and that's what I want you to say, and that's what you should tell people for your interviews." And I was like, "Oh." He goes, "You needed to come up with that yourself. I wasn't going to tell you." Yeah. He goes, "Not only are you a color field artist, but you're one of the best I've ever seen." I was like, "Whoa!" From Ron English, he goes, "Your understanding of color is amazing." He goes, "That's all you should be doing." And I was like, "Well, hold on. I can do other shit too." But anyway, that was one of those things. And Ron English, who's a good friend of mine, today was the one that made me come up with that and think about it and recognize that. So, yeah.
That's impressive.
I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
More than that. Perfect. Yeah.
But yeah, that there's a lot of those things, but that's one of them that was a big one to me, and I realized that I didn't have to write risk, and it didn't really matter anymore about risk being everywhere. That was so important to us when we were kids, and then when I got older, it's not really all about me, and risk is a brand for sure. Yeah. But I'm here to do different things, and my murals are definitely to evoke emotion with color, and right now, if you ask me about my graffiti, and it's very contradictory. Me painting, rainbow butterfly flags and stuff like that is very not anti-graffiti. People don't really get it, but that's something I'm super into right now. It's like the butterflies to me are kind of like rock and roll. They're fiery colors. They're impermanent like graffiti. They're so fucking rad. Yeah. If you can't see that, you're kind of fucking retarded. I don't know what to tell you, but they're rad. But anyway, it's stuff that doesn't really go typical with my graffiti. Yeah. And that's my whole career, juxtaposition of things, good and evil, good and bad, all these things. That's how it always works out for me. Yeah.
Is there a spiritual component to your art?
Yeah, there is, man. Ed Moses was a huge influence of mine, and he was a Buddhist. And Shep Gordon is a Buddhist as well, and he commissioned my first Buddha piece that I did. And I did it. I kind of like took all these elements, and instead of the eye, I did like Alice Cooper's eye. Instead of doves and stuff, I did chickens from Alice Cooper. And I did all these elements, and I gave it to. And instead of like tulips or something, lotus. Instead of lotus, I put like the Chicano roses. Mm-hmm. And I did this Buddha piece. I wrote "Risky" on it, and he goes, "I love it." And I was like, all right, cool, because I didn't know what to think. And he's like, he talked to me a little about Buddhism. And was like, the Buddhist culture, you embrace all these things. And then further, I met Ed Moses, and he really kind of broke it down to me. And I was happened to be working on his final mural when he passed away. We didn't get to do it, but we're working on it. I learned a lot from him. And one of the things I was talking to him, I said, I love your spiders that you do on everything. He's like, they're fucking crabs, idiot. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, they're crabs. And I'm like, oh, I thought they're spiders. And he laughs at it. He's like, yeah. And he goes, well, anyway, the point is I'm definitely afraid of spiders. And I painted them until I embraced them and loved them. Okay. I thought that was a cool Buddhist thing and all these things. And Buddhists, to me, a lot of my pieces that you see, I don't know if we have any here, that I call them peaceful warriors. They're not just Buddhists to me, because these Buddhists, the Buddhists I know, are pretty rough dudes. Mm-hmm. And they're not to be fucked with. Ed Moses being one of them. So I call them peaceful warriors. And if you see, I put a skull headdress on some of them and stuff like that. And I play with it a little bit, but I mean nothing but respect to the culture. I don't know enough about it to really talk about it. There's aspects that I love, and I will take time one day to dig deeper into it. Yeah. But that's where my Buddhas come from. And I'm really spiritual. And if you saw the property, I have 90 something statues of Buddhas around there and all these things. And I pick and choose things from religions that I love. I don't dive too deep into any of them.
You do exhibitions all over the US and worldwide. You just opened your own gallery here. Did that change your perspective on how you work with galleries?
I just realized that, I never understood when galleries said artists are a pain in the ass. I was like, what are you talking about? But some artists can be a pain in the ass. So I respect some galleries a little more now. But no, nothing's changed. But, I just realized that, without making a joke, it's a tough road for like a proper gallery, and some artists do need a lot of help. Like I have a really good infrastructure built in my system, so I'm lucky enough to not have to deal with some of this stuff. But I see some artists that have to deal with a lot of stuff, and it's really rough on them. So I guess to answer your question, I appreciate my galleries a lot more now that I have this gallery.
You're doing street art, fine art, brand collaborations for over 30 years now, and with trends like AI, where do you see art evolving in the future?
Yeah, as far as where I'm going, I don't know. And I've always been an artist that'll never know completion. That's kind of my slogan, an artist will never know completion, because I don't want to know. I like every aspect of art, all different forms of art. I try new things all the time, from tattoo to anything you can imagine, I try it. Sculpting is relatively new to me, and I'm doing very well with it. And I think life is hell of a ride. And I think if you know where you're going, you kind of know the ending. And I don't want to know the ending. I don't want the ride to ever end. So I don't know where I'm going per se. I just I'm blessed enough to be able to pick and choose my projects, and they just keep coming. I keep getting awesome projects, and thank you. And I'm just going to go on that route. Where art is going, interesting question. I don't know. I think that there's going to be a shakedown for sure, because I think that for too long we've been doing art for no reason. And a lot of people are going to get really mad about this. But there's a lot of shit out there that just makes no sense. And people are just doing anything. And they're, it looks cool. And I don't believe in that concept. I think all your stuff needs to have meaning. I don't believe, you do stuff just because, it looks cool. And, my color field stuff isn't just because it looks cool. It's got some meaning behind it. If you look at the lines and circles right here, this is my graffiti on my work. And this is the most rudimentary form of graffiti, from the cloud background to the bubble fill in. The vertical and horizontal letters are the weights and balances of a font with graffiti. I mean, everything has a meaning in the stuff I do, from the butterflies being impermanent to being a celebratory stage of life, and all these things. And I think that, street art, I'm not here to criticize street art. It is the distant cousin from graffiti artists. I think graffiti artists are like the craftsmen of the thing. They spend a lot of time, and they might be outdated, but I think street artists are work smarter, not harder. They do a lot of stencils and wheat pasting and whatnot. And I think it's all great. And a lot of them have some incredible meaning, and it's great. but there's it opened a lot of doors for people that aren't artists to be artists. And I think there's a shakedown coming, and I think we're going to look at this era in art and think a couple things. One, we're going to think it's incredibly powerful and important because it's the first time in hundreds of years we have tapped in such a young demographic of art again since I don't know how long ago. And that's important. And graffiti art is so important because it's the last hand to medium to surface art form. After that, it becomes digital. So there's so many important things there, right? But we're also going to look at it as a big joke because there's so many artists that we're like, why the fuck did that guy do it and make a name for himself? He's fucking absolutely nothing. So we have a lot of that. So it's going to be a double-edged sword, and that's my opinion.
As an artist, your hands are your tools. I see you got tattoos on them. So would you mind sharing the meaning of your tattoos on your hands?
Yeah. It's funny. I don't really have a lot of tattoos, but like, I fidget a lot, I guess. Yeah. And, when I was a kid, I was roommates with Cartoon, and he's a legendary tattoo artist. And he was saying something about tattoos. I said, I could do that. And I did this on my hand. Yeah. And I learned it was harder than I expected, and it got blown out. Yeah. But that's the first one. Show Me is from Esteban Oriol. In LA, we hear so much bullshit, and we just kind of like put our hands like this, and it's an inside joke with us because we're like, show me, stop talking, show me. Nice. Yeah. That's my daughter's names. No Mama's Way. That's a saying that we have in LA. It's kind of like, you got to ask somebody, but no Mama's Way means like, don't fuck with me, fuck off, kind of whatever. Okay. No bullshit kind of thing. Yeah. Place Can Hear. This was a real fun one I did at a trade show one time, and some friends, Franco Vescovi was there and Abel, and we did this. I had to come back later and put a spray cap because people kept handing me cans of beer. Oh, yeah. And I was like, nah, man, spray paint. Yeah. So this is just like Lightning Bolt taking care of business kind of thing, and then that's our studio logo. Yep. That's it.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
My daughter was like 3 or 4, and she gave me this heart.
Oh, she did a tattoo on you?
Yeah.
When she was 3 or 4?
Yeah. And she did the bottom of my feet, and she did the back of my head. She did all kind of stuff.
That's lovely.
They've given a lot of tattoos over the years to some famous people, and they're lucky enough to have been around some wonderful tattoo artists that have given them guns and or machines. I guess we don't call them guns and stuff like that. So yeah.
What's next in the world of RISK?
Oh, the RISK world. Shit. We have so much. We're working on a new book. We're working on this gallery, working on another gallery. But I guess, stay tuned to Instagram, at RISK Rock. It's just easy. But what's coming up? I don't know. There's so much stuff. We have a show in Austin in a couple of days. That's going to be great. It's at Austin Speed Shop. I'm really looking forward to that because I'm a big car guy. And they're in Austin Speed Shop, big fan of the shop. They build these classic hot rods, and they're going to put some pieces in between the hot rods. So that's going to be a great show, a pop-up show in Austin. So that's going to be a fun one. And then we have a show at the Markowitz Gallery in Dallas. And then we have coming up back to Miami, we have the Goldman Gallery. And then we have Chase Gallery out of New York, which are doing a number of things. And we're planning a big art basel with Chase Gallery in New York. And that's going to end the year for us.
RISK, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Discover more inspiring talks, audio documentaries, or art performances. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and visit our website for more information. That's maison-douce.com. maison-douce.com.